Well, I did it. I got every single class to level 20. As such, I'm going to do a tier list, tiering the different classes based on how strong I think they are after doing that. Now, just to be clear, I'm doing this for fun, for my amusement, and for your amusement, because people like this sort of thing. I did not play every class to perfection. I did not look up a tier list for every build on every class. I did not try every build on every class. I played them to what I thought was a good level 20. I tried different builds on different classes, and this is just generally what I think the strength of the different classes are. This is not where I think the fun of the different classes are. This is how I think the strength of the different classes are. Okay? And again, this is just level 20, so in a few weeks this will be irrelevant. This is for fun, and hopefully this at least helps someone somewhere in something. I don't know. But we're going to rank the 5 different ones. I hope to make this a 10-minute video. We're not going to splice in any footage because, you know, to be honest, I'm assuming most of you will just listen to this while looking at your phone or put me on a second monitor or something like that. So there's really no need for me to spend 2 hours splicing in footage about the things I'm talking about. Up first, and up definitely last, is Barbarian. Barbarian is by far, in my opinion, the weakest class in the game. I would recommend a total rework for Barbarian. I'm going to try to keep this video just about the power of the champion, but let's also talk about how fun they are. Barbarian doesn't seem to have been constructed to actually be fun to play. Their big hitting abilities have a long cast time. They have so weird synergy, I guess is the best way to put it. Their synergy is all weird. They seem to be a scaling class with their different weapons, but I don't really know what's going on with Barbarian. Their builds aren't fun. They aren't fun. They are extraordinarily weak. I was changing my spec on Barbarian every 3 to 4 levels, not to try to experiment and find the best build. We know what the best build is. It's bleed tank, and that takes a while to kill enemies, and it's really unfun to play. All their other builds seem to suffer. They just aren't good at all. I don't really know what to do with this class. If I played them again, I could probably do better, based on what I learned from playing all the other classes, because I played them first. But every single class I played after Barbarian seemed tankier, seemed way more damaging, seemed faster, seemed everything was better than Barbarian. I was originally going to make this tier list probably with S, A, and B only, but I have to put Barbarian all the way down in D because they are just awful. They are terrible. Druid did get a lot of buffs. I didn't think they were that bad, but they did get a lot of buffs since the last beta. They're one of the classes I played to level 25. So Druid, I'm going to put tentatively in A or B tier, but I think they're more of an A tier class right now. Now, their pets did become much squishier, so they can't tank indefinitely. However, you don't need to use an action to respawn them. They do respawn pretty quickly. They still do tank for a while. Their out-of-combat healing seems to have been nerfed considerably, which is just frustrating and annoying that they just sort of sit around at low HP a lot. But overall, they seem to be very strong. I tried the melee druid. The ranged druid doesn't seem to be doing too hot, is what I heard from other people. But I found them very fun to play. They could AoE decently. They weren't the best at AoEing. They weren't the worst at single target. They weren't the worst at AoEing. They seem to do everything well. They are pretty tanky. They have a lot of healing options. They have a lot of ways to stay alive. They can just chain clear through everything. They don't have any resource issues or anything like that. Their cooldowns are pretty low as well. So honestly, there was really nothing wrong with druids, and they seem to do pretty good basically at everything. I would consider putting them in B tier just to kind of put them as like the baseline class. Like anyone stronger than them is you know, probably could be toned down a little bit. Anyone weaker than them could probably be buffed a little bit. But I think putting them in A tier, B tier, it really doesn't matter. I think they're really doing fine as is. Necromancer, I'm also going to put in B tier, maybe A tier as well. It's a bit complicated between them. Necromancer is... You'll see my opinion on the classes here pretty quickly here. Necromancer is definitely not weak. They need to resummon their minions. There's been a lot of complaining on the forums. I did not find at all that Necromancer is weak. In fact, I intentionally did the world boss with Necromancer just so I could show that, yes, you can keep your summons up. You can continue to summon even on a boss, even that keeps AoEing. I can't tell because I don't have damage recap, but I felt like I was still doing decent damage. Maybe not the best, but I was still doing decent damage. You can keep your mages alive and they'll keep firing, and I'm pretty sure that will add up to a lot of damage. Even the tanky skeletons will add up to a lot of damage. I did make a video defending Necromancer, if you want to go look at that and my reasonings for that, but I don't think Necromancer is weak at all. I think their clear is a little bit slower than other classes, but they're also much safer than other classes because they always have a front line that will run up and tank the enemies for them. The only time I really got in trouble with them is when I forgot to resummon my front line and then I would get hit with a stun or something. But even then, they're not the squishiest class, and really, they don't seem, once again, they seem pretty much here. I might do them in A tier just because they seem like they don't really have the capability of dying, but I think B tier along with Druid is pretty much fine for them. For Rogue, I also put them in B tier. I think these classes are about fine. The AoEing can get a bit excessive. They can start AoEing a bit too much, in my opinion. But Rogue, I played melee Rogue, but I did try a little bit of crossbow at the end. Rogue needs to do a lot of different actions, particularly if they're doing some dagger builds. They need to be moving around a lot, using abilities to defend themselves a lot. They are squishy, and definitely if I was playing on hardcore, I would never play melee Rogue because I die frequently to stuns and things like that, but you can just get back up anyway, so it's not really that big a deal, right? And they clear very quickly to make up for the fact that they sometimes die. Well, I sometimes die. They are squishy. I'm sure a better player would probably not die, but I'm not the best player. I'd say I'm a good player, but I'm not the best player. The crossbow rogue also seemed to have some decent things that they could do. Realistically, they seemed pretty balanced. I didn't see anything about them that was too over the top. As for the power between them, I would probably rate them maybe like this. Maybe I would actually rate Rogue the best. Rogue does so much damage, and if you're on top of your healing potions, you generally won't die to a boss before you run out of healing potions. You'll just stat check them into the ground. You can use your shadow step, I think that's what it's called, to dash behind the boss if they're doing a big attack. You can also shadow step out of a stun. That's really important because that stops you from getting one shot a bit too badly. Realistically, I would say maybe Rogue goes into the A tier just because they clear so much faster than the other two that, clear speed does matter. But again, they are squishier. They're more prone to dying if you slip up, if things hit you. The other two classes tend to be tankier, and Necromancer tends to have more of a, obviously he has 4 Skelly boys in front of him tanking. Sorry, my cat got a hair in my nose that's really irritating me. So maybe I would rate him like this. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I might even do this. Of the 3, I think Necromancer is the weakest, but I don't really think Necromancer is that much weaker. I think the only real weakness is that they clear a bit slower, but that's just sort of their play style. They have tanks and stuff like that. I didn't play Blood Necromancer, which I wanted to, but due to having to play every class, I couldn't go through and replay. I was having so much fun with my minion Necromancer that I never swapped off the spec. Stacking dots and then stacking minions and keeping your minions up, that was enough micro, and that was fun for me to do. So realistically, I think these 3 would be about fair and even. Once again, the AoEing can get sometimes excessive, but all 3 of them have to work for their AoEs. They don't just get them for free. They can't just run up to a pack of enemies and go, poof, they're all gone. Which, talking about poof, they're all gone, Sorcerer, which I would rate in S tier. Why would I rate Sorceress in S tier? Because she's very boring, and she's very, very powerful. There's really no weakness. They aren't even squishy because you can just slot 1 skill into Fire Shield, which can be used to break out of stuns and go invulnerable and heal 50% of your missing HP. So even if you find yourself in the worst of the worst situation as Sorceress, you can just go boop and it's gone. Your enchantments can get a bit absurd. You're not a fun class. I rate them probably the least fun class. I found their kits very frustrating. I couldn't really find much that I could synergize between. 2 of their rows taking mana, and mana being so limited meant that realistically you just chose one ability that you wanted to spam. This is kind of like back to like 2000s level of gameplay where you just kind of max one ability and then you just spam that one ability. For me, it was Fireball. I fireballed enemies and then they blew up, and then when you enchant Fireball, it blows enemies blow up into a fireball, and then so if you kill one enemy, it blows up, and then the next enemy blows up, and the next enemy blows up, and you can just wipe out an entire pack of enemies by just chucking a left click, right click, left click to weak them the tiniest bit, then right click Fireball kills them, and poof, the entire pack blows up. It's not very interesting. Against bosses, you just stack dots, then Fireball. That's also not very interesting. You can summon Hydras just for some very boring damage. They just sit there and shoot people. I tried the Frost build. The Frost build was a little bit more entertaining, but even then, I just found that with the Frost build, it was kind of the same thing. You left click, then hold right click. Left click, then hold right click. You can't really seem to interact with the mana system much. Some left clicks can get you mana, but realistically, you don't need to. Most enemies die very quickly. Bosses don't die that much. I don't know if they're single target. I mean, I don't have DPS charts. I can't check. I felt that the sorceress was doing less damage than the other classes, but because she's so ranged and because she's so safe, it kind of didn't matter. Nothing could really threaten her, and she just wiped out packs of enemies. Even elites would get melted very quickly. Bosses, she didn't quite have the damage, because these three, I went with the Necromancer, was very safe, and I could just stack dots on bosses while the skeletons tanked. The Druid was tanky and melee, so he could just sit there and stat check them. The Rogue, she's very high damage. He's very high damage, whichever one I had to do. And I could just melt bosses. So these three were good against bosses. Barbarian struggled against bosses hard. Sorceress could take longer to kill them, it felt like. But at the end of the day, I rarely felt threatened. It just sort of felt like eventually I'm gonna win. It just like you can't really stop me, right? That's kind of the way I felt about it, and that's kind of how I'd rank these classes. I'm not gonna. I might do a fun tier list tomorrow just for my own fun, but for now I think Sorceress is just way too good for being so boring. I think that's really the best way to put it. Her skills don't really synergize the most with each other. Frost skills seem to somewhat, but at the end of the day, you're just turbo stacking one ability, then massacring packs of enemies, and that's your build, and that's your playstyle, and it's just old, it's outdated, it's very effective, clearly, it's a very effective playstyle, but it's just so boring. It reminds me of like old Diablo 2 builds where you just put 20 points in an ability and then boop, 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 you wipe out enemies. It's sure, you know, if you want to play Diablo 2, but like if you want to play Diablo 2, in my opinion, you should go play Diablo 2. And as of now, there's only one class in the game. There's only one class that gets to do that. The other classes need to, sure, you can stack an ability, but you need to interact with the rest of your kit to play optimally. Sorceress can practically be a 3-button class at present, which is just kind of silly when you think about it. All your other buttons, other than your left click and whatever you put on your right click, all of those are just going to be support abilities. They're going to be utility abilities. I don't know. It'll probably change at level 60. I'm sure it'll change at level 60. I'm sure it will. But for now, Sorceress is just supremely effective at being boring, which isn't, in my opinion, a good thing. But there you go. I would rank her the highest. Rogue is very complicated, and I'm not sure I'd want to play Rogue over long periods of time because it might get a bit annoying. But in the short, you know, in the 5 or I think I played her for like 3 or 4 hours to get to level 20. I think she was the fastest by far because if you play Rogue optimally, you just annihilate through enemies. You can die, but it does not matter. You just trash through packs of enemies so quickly. You will easily make up for it. Even if you have a random death, it doesn't matter. You just annihilate enemies. I think this would be a good rating for them. Potentially, I put Rogue up to A tier just because I think of these three, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a good ranking. I don't think any of these three are overpowered. I don't think so. Maybe, but again, we're level 20. We don't know, right? It's just my gut feeling, just playing them a little bit. I don't think any of them are overpowered. I don't think any of them are underpowered. I do think that Necromancer suffers, and I will go to the people that complain about Necromancer being underpowered. I do think that Necromancer suffers in the minion build from a diversity issue. I think if you don't use the tanky skeletons, that you can suffer from not having them be tanky, but they're tanky for a reason, no? I also think it can be quite frustrating if you're trying to use the damage skeletons that you need to constantly be resummoning them. That just sort of takes away from your time, so to speak. But later on, you will have talents that reduce the amount of damage they take, that increase the amount of healing they do. So I think later on, it will be far more capable to just keep them healed up. You'll have to press your button every so often to heal them. But, at the end of the day, you're micromanaging your skeletons. If you want your skeletons to be damaging, then you should be having to micro them. We should never have Diablo 2 Necromancers come back. I played a lot of Diablo 2 Necromancer, and let me tell you, I don't think it's good for the game. I do think Necromancer is balanced right now if you play them properly. I think Damaged Necromancer is probably going to be more viable later on. As of now, I see no issue with Necromancer. So this would be, in my opinion, the power tier list of the 5 classes. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tell me. I am interested in your guys' opinion as well. So what do you guys think? Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I hope all of you have a great rest of your day.